always come back.
If you want to survive a shift at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, you're gonna want some brain power. With that said, it's pretty easy to see which characters from the movie would be more helpful than others. I'm Samantha with Wicked Binge, and these are 5 nights at Freddy's movie characters, dumb to brilliant. We'll be starting off with the least intelligent characters and working our way up the IQ charts. These characters are not so bright. Probably surprising nobody, we're giving the lowest spot on our list to Jeff and his friends. Often when a group of characters as low down as Jeff and company are introduced, they're used as cannon fodder to show the threats that the main antagonists can pose. These guys are absolutely no exception. While we can at least give Jeff some credit for successfully leading this break-in of an abandoned pizza parlor using the word credit,
I see a way in.
he and his goons still just thoughtlessly decided to rough the place up without any regard for the consequences. What's more is that the plan is just stupid. They break into the place when Mike isn't there to discredit his work as a security guard. You know, by messing the place up, while Mike is not there. He is not working. If they really wanted to discredit Mike's work as a security guard, they should have gone while he was on his shift. That way his work would actually be discredited. But there's no reason he'd get fired for something he literally could not prevent on account of not being there, and this stunt got all 3 of them, along with Jeff's sister Maxine, killed in pretty brutal fashion. If that's not a bottom spot act, we don't know what is. Now, while we feel really mean for doing this, we're giving the next position to the animatronics, aka William Afton's victims, with one exception we'll be getting into later. For now, consider this the umbrella entry for these poor, unfortunate child souls. Their minds are malleable, given how Afton is able to manipulate them to do their bidding. They are unable to communicate in typical ways, being the souls of traumatized children, and so they often react to any intruders by brutally attacking and killing them. When Abby joins the gang, we see that they really just want someone to play with at heart. They really are just normal kids who happen to also be rotting corpses using animatronic animals as their bodies. Before we get too morbid, let's talk about a child with a somewhat happier existence, Abby Schmidt. One of the movie's main characters, Abby is more gifted with creative smarts than academic ones. She expresses herself very effectively through drawing even, bringing out her subconscious connection to Golden Freddy and the other animatronics. She's also refreshingly honest and willing to give anyone a chance, which is both her biggest strength and weakness.
Hey, Abby, if I asked you to wait in the car, would you?
No.
The only thing keeping her from being any higher is the fact that she's naive. You know, like you'd expect a child to be. We're not exactly gonna be super hard on her for that. With that, let's move on to the more average tier. These characters are pretty smart. Kicking off this category is the holder of the most unexpectedly gruesome death of the movie, Maxine. Max gains a few points right off the bat for her hesitation to go along with Jeff and Jane's frankly stupid plan to get Mike fired. She's able to essentially lead a double life, helping Max by babysitting Abby and thus building a rapport with both of them, all the while making some extra cash by working for his legal archenemy, Aunt Jane. She doesn't have any particularly impressive feats of intellect, but she's consistently competent on a basic level.
I wish someone would buy me a ring.
And also has a fully developed brain. And let's be honest, that's all she needed to be ranked above the previous 3. Now we can finally move on to the movie's main protagonist, Mike Schmidt. To say the least, Mike doesn't have it easy. He's the very embodiment of a guy who's really just trying to get by. What's more, he constantly wrestles with guilt over witnessing the kidnapping of his little brother Garrett as a child. That traumatic experience left Mike deeply wounded, making him sometimes impulsive and always overly vigilant.
And that's usually the part where people tell me I'm crazy.
His obsession with finding out who kidnapped Garrett drives his entire life, and while this is understandable, it also makes him quite volatile and, consequently, makes it difficult for him to find work. But while all of this would suggest him belonging lower on the list, there's also the fact that he's capable enough to consistently find work, to provide for his kid sister, and to oppose his aunt in a courtroom setting. He also ultimately helps Vanessa and the animatronics defeat Afton for good. Or at least until the sequel. His determination gives him some good intelligence points, but his occasional lack of self-control keeps him from ending up any higher. Let's give a quick shout out to our main man, Matt Pat, next. In the FNAF movie, the game theory famous YouTuber cameos as a friendly waiter with enough critical thinking to question the age-old mantra of breakfast being the most important meal of the day.
Some people say that, but it's just a theory.
Gotta wonder if Mike and him will team up in the inevitable sequel, right? And following the trend of YouTuber cameos, we can't forget about taxi driver Korix Kenshin this time around. Like Matt Pat, he seems like a nice enough guy, just doing his job as a humble taxi driver. He's smart enough to survive, and given his luck of having to Uber a small child with a 7-foot animatronic bear in tow, that's an impressive feat in itself. We've now reached our top 5. These are the brilliant characters. As much as we hate to put her this high, we have to give the next spot to Aunt Jane. As all-around aggravating of a person she is, Jane is admittedly one of the sharper characters in the movie. In fact, that's precisely why she's so awful. She clearly views herself as superior to those around her, showing a complete lack of respect for Mike and his ability to provide for Abby. Despite only wanting the government support that will come with custody of Abby, she manages to emotionally manipulate Abby's teacher to try and build her case up. She also has a good idea of her nephew's connections and is able to use Maxine as a sort of spy to try and gather incriminating evidence against him to show he's unfit to raise Max. Since Max and Mike are pretty close friends, with the former having possibly stronger feelings, this probably involved some clever manipulation on Jane's part. But what's a brilliant mind without a brilliant lawyer to back it up? Doug doesn't have much screen time, but we'd be remiss if we didn't give him a coveted position on our list. To get the obvious out of the way, Doug is a lawyer, meaning that he's successfully passed law school, of course. There's not much else about him to go on, since he only appears in 2 scenes and only as an accessory to Jane therein.
My lawyer and I will have to take you to court.
But he's also smart enough to try to get out of working for Jane once he comes to the great philosophical realization of, dear God, this woman is crazy, get me out of here. From one branch of legal work to another, the Bronze Medal of Intellect goes to Vanessa Afton. The deuteragonist of the movie is also one of its most divisive and outright confusing characters. Vanessa's motives are strange, and the lack of much direct exposition in the movie makes it hard for anyone who isn't an expert on the games to figure it out. But to sum it up as simply as possible, Vanessa knows that the animatronics are haunted. She also knows why they're haunted, hence why she keeps an eye on the pizzeria and the people therein. She also threatens to literally shoot Mike if he ever brings Abby back there.
I will shoot you.
Which, while it's framed as a total heel turn that comes out of nowhere, was more likely her way of pushing Mike and Abby away so they wouldn't even want to come back. This was after encouraging the pair to play with the animatronics, which was done out of an effort to appease them so they wouldn't, bite them in half. It wouldn't have hurt Vanessa to be more direct, and being a police officer who knows this killer's location, you'd think she would be able to do more than anyone else. So while she is smart, we have to place her just below Golden Freddy, the runner-up of today's list. While most of the children in the film are just, children, Golden Freddy is a little different. He specializes in manipulating others to get what the gang wants, making him the de facto leader of the animatronics. He uses Mike's trauma to try and convince him to give up Abby to them in exchange for Garrett's life, a promise which, for obvious reasons, he can't keep. He's also able to track Abby down, presumably kill or at least incapacitate Aunt Jane, and coerce Abby into coming back to the pizzeria to join the gang all with the coolness of a cold-blooded serial killer.
They're all waiting for you.
But as impressively sharp as this kid is, he's not quite on the same level of his boss, William Afton. Man, is he gonna not be at the very bottom of any of these videos? We hate to be predictable, but come on. The man got away with serial child murder for decades with zero repercussions. On top of being able to elusively pull off his crimes and get away with them legally, he was able to use his victims to commit more crimes to keep things going. But perhaps his smartest move was his choice of career as Steve Raglan, a career counselor. By working to help struggling people get jobs, he was able to get anyone connected to his victims a job at the illustrious Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria, which in his master plan was basically a roundabout death sentence.
You, however, are finished.
Knowing his intellectual feats, we wouldn't be surprised if his promise to come back held some actual weight. But either way, he's definitely earned the gold medal of intellect.